Well,
Okay,
it doesn't matter if it's
without-
true or not. It's true now because it's written.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that to that statement, it is not likely that every fattening dessert has chocolate. You have
All right,
eggs
let
or
me run
butter.
through it. Let me run through that. Every dessert with chocolate, so that would be A. Is that about right, Russ? That'd be A, right? Is high in calorie. But it's not a conditional statement. It's a demonstrative statement. You're saying it is. Okay. Okay. I guess you want to go, but I'm not even sure you can't, I'm not sure we can translate this to it then, but okay. And every dessert that is high in calories is fattening.
Mhm.
But again, there's no conditionality to this. And then, so every dessert with chocolate is fattening, and it's the absence of conditionality. Again, go back to A. It's really interesting. Well, I mean, it's really not interesting. But think about the difference between any and every. Does any mean every?
No, no.
Well, then they're not. One implies conditionality.
Mhm.
Any means I'm looking at all these desserts, right?
Right.
Any of them that contain chocolate have a certain thing.
Mhm.
But this says everyone.
Mhm.
There's no conditionality. So the best I can explain, because it does follow. I mean, in terms of structure, that is following. But it requires you to make this, to get that if then is conditional,
Mhm.
Yes.
right? And that when you say when it rains, I'll get what is conditional.
Or every time it rains.
Well, any time it rains, but you're not saying it rains all the time.
Right.
So it's conditional. But this is every dessert, there's no exception. This is, you can't get to any time it rains from this statement because this says every dessert. There are no exceptions.
Regardless of what it's made with.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna go with here the absence of conditionality. Give us some thought.
I just read it, I see why it's right, but I read it that whenever, it says wherever there are people who are indifferent to the environment, pollution's a problem. To me, that means every time people are indifferent, there's pollution. Not any time, every time.
Well, again, I'd have to, here it's, if we go back to the original statement, it's, pollution is a problem wherever, and therefore it is not the case that pollution is always a problem. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Every dessert with chocolate. I'm not getting, I'm getting a disconnect between, now you're telling me, if it's for that to be the same, right? Instead of saying pollution is a problem whenever there are people who are different, you'd be required to say it's always a problem. Because you're saying that the chocolate, the dessert, always, essentially. So there's a difference between always and, which is not conditional. It's really interesting. Well, it may not be to you, but, well, I mean, I know it is to you. Right. But that, who thinks about this stuff?
Oh.
Which is why you may want to consider not, like, how do I get number 4 right? Right? How do I get number 6 right? Because on the test, that can have a benefit. This,
You put a lot of time in for the same amount of points.
yeah, yes, and that's thinking like the Lord. It's like, yeah, okay, what can I achieve? Let's get it, and but the flip of that is absolutely a worthwhile endeavor, right? To try to get your arms around things, not necessarily because they're going to pay short-term dividends, right? But because your mind is becoming capable of processing more layered and complicated stuff. Yeah. Which I had to do, you know, I mean, I practice appellate law, to get to that level on appellate stuff, which I'm not naturally good at. I had to, absolutely had to expand my mind, for sure. Still a lot of empty space there. No, it's true. You know, but this is appellate law to me. When I'm doing this, I want to be around my buddy Jim, you know, because Jim being freak bright, Jim's a law secretary, you know, John, he's, you know, he's a freak bright guy, you know. So as I said, Jimbo, so what's going on with this? And then he would explain it to me, but I think I've explained it correctly. I'd be writing it off. What else we got?
Thank you, Ed, sorry.
Sorry?
No, Ed had another one.
Did you?
Yeah, I was thinking about number,
Well, let me know when your deliberation is
11.
over.
number 11.
What, well, are you still thinking about it?
No, I made
Oh.
the choice.
Yeah, I got
Number
that
11.
one wrong.
Oh, now they gang up on me.
Yeah.
All right. 11.
Oh.
That was my time. 1880. So the issue, the claims made above are incompatible with which one of the following generalizations. So the issue is definitely funky. One, you're told that the claims are incompatible. So what does incompatible mean? Heads is incompatible with tails. Incompatible means it can't happen. And so I'm looking for an answer choice that cannot happen. But that answer choice is going to be a generalization. So it's a principle issue. Where the answer choice is a principle, a broader statement, that simply is incompatible with the example I was given. Okay. From 1880 to 2000, so I've talked about 120 years, Britain's economy grew fivefold. But emissions of CO2, a greenhouse gas, were the same on a per capita basis in 2000 as they were in 1880. So it's very straightforward. Now, here, this came up, not this question, but that came up not yesterday, but the weekend before at PACE, where somebody said, well, what's with this per capita stuff? And I kind of take that for granted because I'm old, you know, so, I mean, you know, I'm sure I spent most of my life not really knowing what per capita meant. But, so, what from this argument, you're just saying, okay, there's this 120-year period in Britain, and I've been told the economy grew fivefold, so that's now a fact. But I've also been told that CO2 was unchanged. Now, what I mean by unchanged is the emissions were the same on a per capita basis. So if you had made $10,000 in 1880 and you had made $100,000 in the year 2000, the per capita emissions didn't change. So you had growth, but you didn't have an increase in CO2. So we had a very vibrant economy. So the per capita income, you can read this, right? And it says that the CO2 emissions were the same. So they were the same, they did not change, right? So my ancestors in 1880 who made $100, right? And my relatives who are there now who are making $100,000. So the per capita income has gone up from 100 to 100,000. But this is telling me that the CO2 emissions remain the same. You got it?
Mhm.
Yes.
And that's all they said. So that is consistent with the position that robust growth does not necessarily lead to an increase in CO2, which is going to be contrary to the dogma of the day, which is that CO2 emissions has to go up when there's growth. And so I think some people are going to resist it because they don't want to accept the facts that we're given. Okay, but that's all they said, okay. So I'll go directly to the answer, but then I'll be happy to, cover anything else. So what's incompatible with that is E. Because E says, economic growth, would we all agree we've had economic growth?
Yeah.
Economic growth always increases household income and consumption, which inevitably increases per capita emissions of CO2. But what
Yeah.
didn't we have?
Increases CO2.
Yeah, so that's incompatible with it. Right. But again, if you're, I absolutely get that folks stuck in dogma would look at this and say, well, that can't possibly be true. Well, okay, you have your reality, I have mine.
If you read it fast too, you might not pick up incompatible if you know.
Yes, and that's what
That
they're
was an
doing.
issue I had the first time, and when I was looking at the answer to it, I'm like, doesn't make sense, and then when I saw it, I'm like, wait a second. I'm looking for the opposite of what I was looking for.
Absolutely, and that's what happens when you try to read too fast. That's what happens when you assume an issue will say what you expect it to say.
Yes.
That
Right?
could have been.
Yeah, and that's what they're testing, is can you just be textual? I assume nothing. Give me the words, I'll read the words, I'll understand the words. If I don't understand the words, I'll get my ass out of there. Where I see an issue that is infrequent, and that issue is infrequent, it's going to correlate with a higher fail rate. Now, that may be to my benefit, because one of the reasons there's a higher fail rate is there are a bunch of people misreading the issue, but I haven't misread the issue. So this may not be at all difficult, but if I don't understand the issue, I'm completely screwed. So does 11 make sense?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, because I didn't read and realize incompatible. That's why I got it wrong.
And it's so basic. I mean, it's if you misidentify the issue, who cares how right you are? It's just a discipline in this stuff.
Did we do number 9 yet? On 3?
We have not.
Okay.
And number 9,
It's interesting.
which one of the following is true most helps to explain surprising? So that we had one of these before, the surprising thing, now the Babbleism is one like this, right? Is you're gonna get something and you say, wait a minute, what's with that? And you're gonna try to come up with something that would help explain it. Okay. So, which one of the following is true most helps to explain the surprising fuss? Again, the word surprising jumps out at me, and I would approach this as a paradox. Okay. Organized word of mouth marketing campaigns are driven by product boosters who extol a product to friends and acquaintances. And again, here's where you stop, right? So what are those people who used to go around door to door?
Telemarketing? No.
Well, no, but there used to be like a business.
Yeah.
No.
Door-to-door
They would
sales.
sell stuff door to door,
Yeah,
like Tupperware or something like that.
yeah.
Well, I'm saying I personalize this, right? So I'm reading this and I'm saying, organized word of mouth marketing campaigns are driven by product boosters who extol a product. So to extol a product to friends, that would be somebody selling Tupperware, right? So I'm saying, okay, that person selling Tupperware is going to come to my door. Okay. A study found these campaigns are more successful when the product booster openly admits to be part of an organized marketing campaign. Stop. So the second sentence introduces what's likely to be the paradox, right? So the person with the Tupperware says to me, I'm part of a marketing campaign. Well, would it be fair to say that the drawback of that is you're telling me something I may not have known? Right, that you weren't just doing this on your own, yeah?
Right.
But the benefit of it is you're being what? Honest. So all that's going through my mind as I get to the second sentence. And that is what reading, doing the analysis is all about. So could you guys do that? You got it, right?
Yeah.
But I need to see this person at my door. Oh, okay. So So then they're saying to me, Peter, this is just not me solo, right? There's actually a marketing campaign behind this. Okay, I appreciate you telling me that, and I would appreciate that you telling me that. Okay, and here we follow. This is surprising because one of the purported advantages of word-of-mouth campaigns is that consumers take a less skeptical stance towards word-of-mouth messages than towards mass media. Yeah, meaning that last sentence is, it's surprising because a lot of people wouldn't know, unless you said that, right? They would take for granted, they would assume that you were just in there because you liked the product, that it was just you alone, not you part of the Tupperware program. You're just selling it because you believe in it, right? So that last one is saying, it's surprising you would tell me this. And then, one of the advantages is that when you don't say anything, the customer is less skeptical. And now I've said something, so would it be fair to say the customer may be more skeptical?
Yeah.
And that may make it harder to make a sale, right?
Right.
But what are we being?
They're less skeptical when you tell
Oh,
them.
no, but what is the salesperson being?
Honest.
Honest.
Oh, so maybe being honest offsets the skepticism. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you're saying, well, now I'm not skeptical because the person's being honest and being, so I'm just kidding, I don't have the exact answer, but in terms of how to help explain this, the advantage of being honest outweighs the fact that the person would not have been skeptical if I didn't say anything. Because the person would have assumed I was just doing this on my own. So with that, I'll go down to the credited answer, which is E. When a word-of-mouth product booster admits his or her affiliation, it fosters a more relaxed and in-depth discussion of the marketed product. I mean, I would need to read the others in addition to that. But yes, if we had a more relaxed and in-depth discussion, I erased this, but if now it's a fact, right, that we had a more in-depth, relaxed discussion, I would infer it would be more likely we had a sale. Yes?
Yes.
And that then is acting as compensation for, but I might have gotten away with it if I kept my mouth shut, right? So there's a benefit by being straightforward that offsets the possible benefit I would have had by just keeping my mouth shut and then letting a less skeptical customer not know that. But if I had done that, I wouldn't have had a more relaxed and in-depth discussion about the product. Capiche?
Capiche.
So, again, I would need to read A, B, C, and D, but E definitely makes sense.
Right.
Does that make sense, Edward?
Yes.
Okay. What else?
Number 10.
Number 10. The consultant conclusion follows logically which one of the following is assumed, so it's a sufficient assumption. Okay, so I'm looking for answer choice A, B, C, D, or E. If we're a premise in the argument, then the argument's conclusion must be true. Okay. Consultant. If Whaley sticks with her current platform in the upcoming election, she will lose to her opponent by a few percentage points among voters under 50, while beating him by a bigger percentage among voters 50 and over. So let me just take that in. And you could just scribble something down if you wanted to. In other words, what I was just told there is if she sticks with her current platform, she will lose to her opponent. So it's going to be those who are 50 and under, 50 and above, 50 and above. Okay, and what happens? Right now, if she continues, she's going to lose by a few points in this category, All right, so let's say she loses 53 to 47. So she loses by a few points, right? While beating him by a bigger percent in 50 and over. So over here, it goes the other way. It goes 46, 54. So she's plus 8 over here, and she's minus 6 over here. Okay, so she's losing this vote, and she's getting this vote. Okay. Therefore, sticking with her current platform will allow her to win the election. It's the same one we just did about the numbers.
Mhm.
Do you see it? It's the numbers. How many voters are there under 50? How many voters are there over 50? If there are more voters over 50, she wins.
Yeah.
Even if those numbers are the same, it's +6, -6.
Yeah, but if it's, all you need here is if you have more voters here, then she sticks with her present platform and
She's
she
gonna
wins.
win.
And so, it's a conceptual test. I mean, this is just in what we've done today, this is the second time this has come up, right? And this was, again, they refer you to percentage points. You see how they're referring you to percentage points? But they don't tell you anything about raw numbers. So if you're gonna give me percentage points, you have to give me raw numbers. Yes? So the answer there is D. There will be more voters in the election who are 50 and over than will be under 50. If that statement is true, then the conclusion is unassailable, that, she's gonna win. Well, so where's Aristotle? I know it's a lot of work, but you want to do this. You still want to be lawyers?
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this. How cool do you think it is? And the nerve of you, absolute nerve, shocks the conscience. You mean to say you want people to pay you to do what you love to do for the rest of your miserable, hollow, shallow, desperate lives? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Good, because that's how I live my life. You with me? Think about how powerful it is. I mean, the work sucks. It doesn't really, I really kind of love it. But do you get, that's what this needs to be about. And if it's anything less than that, why would you do it? And why would you go through this? Because you're doing something you didn't do a few months ago.
Correct.
Yeah. And there's no guarantee you're going to succeed. And there's no deadline date saying, well, it's going to happen. Well, I don't know that it's going to happen, right? So you have none of those guarantees. But isn't it motivation that people will pay you to do what you love to do? It's so bloody cool.
With the number 7.
No. I'm resentful, I don't want to be here, I hate doing this.
Okay. I think it's so cool. I love this test, it's so cool.
All right, see what you got it. Number 7?
Yeah.
Let me just- So 7, which one of the following, which one is most strongly supported? So this is right from our original diagram. Here's the stated facts. And all they want you to do here is go from here to here. In the most conservative way humanly possible. That's all they're doing. They're gonna give you this stuff, right? And you're gonna say, what's next, right? That's really, okay. So what am I gonna learn here about the Kuna? The Kuna, now you can tell me who they are. The people native to several Panamanian islands, generally have a low incidence of high blood pressure. You stop. I'm not lost, I got it. They generally have low blood pressure. Next. But Kuna who have moved to the mainland do not have a low incidence of high blood pressure. I got it, right? You left home and now you're getting high blood pressure. So there's something on the mainland that wasn't on the island. Could be stress, could be urbanization, could be water, it could be food, it could be air, it could be any number. You know, no, okay. But that's how I'm reading. You say, okay, I got it. Kuna who live on the island. Now you're taking me back to the folks who didn't leave. Kuna who live on the island, unlike those on the mainland,
Right.
that's really important to me, typically drink several cups of cocoa a day. So isn't it, if we just stop and you're stopping. So would it be fair to say there's some kind of relationship between drinking several cups of coffee a day and low blood pressure?
Yes, there's a correlation.
Unless, because we don't know what they did when they got to the mainland, right? So let's see, because maybe they kept drinking several cups of coffee. Let's see what the fourth sentence says. The cocoa is minimally processed and thus high in flavonoids. Okay. So if we're going to,
Correlation, causation.
well, yeah, yes, if it were a flaw issue, that's where it would be going. It's not a flaw issue.
Okay.
Right? So all we're doing is saying, so what's next here? Well, based on the information you gave me, which is all I have, doesn't it sound like the folks who went to the mainland may not have access to, or equal access to, cocoa that's minimally processed and high and more importantly, high in flavonoids, because it says it's minimally processed and thus high in flavonoids, right? So I'm going, if I were going to infer, based just on this information, not outside this information, I would say what the folks on the mainland don't have is cocoa that's high in flavonoids. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm just looking for that answer. And again, if we just go down to E, which one of the following is most strongly supported? E says, drinking several cups of flavonoid-rich cocoa per day tends to prevent high blood pressure. Yes, because that's present with the folks on the island, and it's absent, or it may be absent, right? Because we don't know for the folks on the, but it's certainly present for the folks on the island. That make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Okay. What else?
Did you do number 5?
We have not been on the side.
Okay. We go to percentage.
Which one of the 5 principles of values most helps justify the reasoning? All right. So, again, change the way you read, slow it down. Practice this at home. And have a plan. So I know what I'm looking for, right? I know if there's going to be a principle, this is going to be an example. Right? So I'm going to need to walk it up the ladder. Here's the example. The decisions that one makes can profoundly affect one's life years later. Yeah, decisions have consequences, you bet they do. So one should not regret the missed opportunities of youth. For had one decided instead to seize one of these opportunities, one would not have some of the close personal relationships one currently has. I'm so stopping. I mean, who talks this way? Well, again, I mean, nobody talks this way, right? Yeah. So, but I get it. I shouldn't regret
Decisions you made when you were 17 or 25.
well, yeah, let me, I'm still working. I shouldn't regret my failure to seize an opportunity because I may have developed close personal relationships by declining that opportunity. So I'm now on close personal relationships are good. Final sentence. And everyone deeply cherishes their close personal relations. So now, every personal relationship is something that I deeply cherish. So that's the end of the argument. And so, the principle is that if something ends up being something you deeply cherish, don't regret the decision you made to get there. So maybe whatever it was I did in my youth, right, that missed opportunity that I perceived to be there, if that missed opportunity led to something I deeply cherish, then it was no problem. So that's where I'm going. And the answer there is B. One should not regret making a decision if it helped to bring about something that one cherishes. Yeah. Yeah. But the languages, I mean, you guys don't want to read that, I don't want to read that. But you get, that's kind of the language I would use on the appellate brief. That when I'm writing to a court, you get, I'm not writing to you guys or to myself, you get it? So that's my language, that actually is my language, not the cherish thing. But the use of the word one or something, one should. So does that make sense, Ed?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Number 4? Okay. The claim that more steel was purchased when it could be manufactured more cheaply plays which one of the following roles in the argument? So role in the argument, maybe about, it depends on the test. It could be as few as 2, it could be as many as 5. But I expect maybe 3. Okay, maybe 4. So okay. Let's see, when I get to this, I want to stop. So the claim is that more steel was purchased when it could be manufactured more cheaply. Okay. So according to economists, people's tendency to purchase a given commodity is inversely proportional to its price. Okay. So I don't know where you are in life, you know what I'm saying? But if you need to stop and try to understand what that said, well, that's where you need to be, and it's not the better place to be. You should be able to say, okay, so when the price is high, then there's less demand for it. When the price is low, there is more demand for it. But okay, so I have, I'm more likely to purchase a commodity when the price is low. Okay. When new techniques produced cheaper steel, more steel was purchased. And that's where I've been directed to. So there were improvements in how steel was produced that led to a lower price of steel, led to more steel being purchased. That's up to what role in the argument does that play? Okay. Nevertheless, once machine-produced lace became available at much lower prices than the handcrafted variety, lace no longer served to advertise its wearer's wealth, and the lace market collapsed. So now I have an analogy, and the analogy is contrary to what just happened with the steel. Right? Because the steel is saying, well, we had improvements in production technique and the cost of steel fell. But now this third sentence says, well, nevertheless, when the cost of producing lace fell, demand did not go up. And the market collapsed. And in the conclusion, obviously, then there are exceptions to the economist's general rule. So the role in the argument of the steel thing is it's something that gets rebutted by the argument's conclusion, right? Because the steel thing was the lower we put the lower that price of steel goes, the greater the demand. That's what that second sentence says. But the third sentence turns it on its head and says, well, you know what? That didn't hold in the lace market. We made lace much more available, much less expensive, and yet the market collapsed because there was a substitute product. And therefore the conclusion that follows from that is therefore there are exceptions to the economist's general rule. And therefore that, that's where so the role in the argument of the second sentence, when new techniques produced cheaper steel, more steel was purchased, that is something designed to be rebutted by the argument. That is, you can call it a statement, you can call it a claim, you can call it a principle, but whatever you call it, you get that what's claimed in that second sentence is designed to be refuted by the remainder of the argument, by the analogy, and then by the argument's conclusion. You see that? So now I'm just looking for that. And the answer is C. It is used to illustrate the generalization that, according to the argument, does not hold in all cases. Yeah, the generalization is the lower the price of something, the greater the demand for it. That's refuted by the argument, in that we know that it doesn't apply in the lace market.
Can we go range of choice B?
E?
B. Charles.
You don't like truisms? Sure. D says, it is the evidence that according to the argument led economists to embrace a false hypothesis. Why is the hypothesis false? I thought,
It's not true at all times.
well, yeah, didn't the conclusion say there are exceptions to it? And doesn't that imply it's valid under some circumstances? So D is, the depth of D is the hypothesis is not a false hypothesis. It is simply not a universally valid hypothesis. Yes. It's all about language. Ain't nothing fancy about it. It's all about language. What else? Anything else?
Let's do number 5, so that.
Number 5,
No.
section 3?
Yes, please.
The reasoning in the resident's argument is flawed in that the argument overlooks the possibility of that. Okay. Number 5. Resident. Data indicates that 30% of the houses in our town have inadequate site drainage, and 30% have structural defects. So I already know what they do, because I've done it before. So here's what they want you to do, Ed. They want you to read this, and they want you to infer what the writer does not imply.
Right.
So here's what if you got this wrong, here's what you saw in your mind's eye. You saw 30% have inadequate site drainage. There's your 30% with inadequate site drainage. That's what you saw. And 30% have structural defects. And then you saw this. And that makes you a loser. That's what you saw, because they're sucking you in. Therefore, hence, at least 60% of our town's houses have some kind of problem that threatens threatens their integrity.
Mhm.
And the flaw there is,
60%.
there are some houses that vote,
Right.
and therefore it's not 60%. Right? So, that's the flaw. Right? The person, whoever's doing this is saying, well, here's a discrete 30%. That has nothing to do with that. You draw 30 homes here, draw 30 homes here, and therefore you have 60 homes. But the fact of the matter is that if 15 of these homes have both, then it's not 60 homes that have one or the other, it's 45. Because these are shared.
Right.
So, and that has been tested in the past. I've seen that a number of times. So it's the same flaw, right? And so just be aware of that. If that shows up as a flaw, if a house has both, it only counts once. It doesn't count, as two separate houses. So the answer there is E. Some of the houses that have structural defects that could make them unsafe also have inadequate site drainage.
I was choosing, and I'm tossing between E and B.
Well, do you understand E? Go back.
I do, but I kept, when I was trying to decide, I had circled both answers because I couldn't decide.
And D says, yeah. Well, inadequate site drainage can make a house unsafe, but that doesn't say the nature of its being unsafe was caused by a structural defect. So were you reading that inadequate site drainage can make a house unsafe and then defining what made it unsafe as a structural defect? In other words, a house can be unsafe for any number of reasons, yes?
Right.
Okay. But this argument is,
Oh,
it's got to be a structural defect, right? And B doesn't inform me of that. If B said, and again, it's hard to make this stuff up, inadequate site drainage can cause a structural defect, then I think they'd have to throw the question out because that's too close to being a correct answer. It may actually be a correct answer. So if you didn't do that analysis, it's wrong because there are any number of reasons the house can be unsafe, right? If you were substituting unsafe for the term structural defect, well, don't do that again, but that would have made it valid, I think. Yes.
See, I was, when I was reading it, I put a question sign at D.
D for truces.
Yeah, D, you're right, because I was reading in terms of the 60%.
Well, I don't know, we have to read D.
And,
We'll
I
do
recognize E was the correct answer, but sometimes I'm reading it and I have question according to the answer, I put a question mark. These many houses in town have neither inadequate site drainage or structural defects that could make them unsafe. So I was thinking about the 60%, that they're 40.
Well, Ed is many most. There's a difference between the word many and the word most.
Yeah.
You bet there is.
Yeah,
You bet there is.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's right.
Yeah. It's really an interesting tab, because then you guys are just reading regular words as, regular words.
Yeah.
Right, which is what you're supposed to do. But then you want to charge people to do that in a different way.
Yeah.
You want to charge them a lot. And you want them to come back for repeat business. And then you want to charge them more.
Right.
And then you want to see if you can get all their money.
I have a question.
Oh, yay.
What would you say would be like an average to get correct? That would be okay.
Well, when you say, Jessica, when you say be okay, you
Like
mean,
being like the 150s or higher.
Okay, so if your plan were to score, say, 152, right? And a 152, depending on your GPA, right? But a 152 would lead to admission at a bunch of local law schools. Again, as long as you don't have my GPA, right? If you have a 2.68, no. But if your GPA is at or above 3, and you came in with a 152, under present conditions, it's very, very likely you'd be accepted at Toro, Hofstra, Pace, Walden is not, New York law. I mean, every application is viewed differently, but there's no way you're not coming back with a bunch of acceptances. If you're applying as a 152 as a minority candidate, you may well come back with acceptances from schools you don't expect acceptances from. Might come back with St. John's, might come back with Brooklyn. And that has to do with, and again, I don't have the most recent data, but the data is pretty stark, that the median score for a Caucasian or an Asian individual, the median score is going to be just about a 152, 153. The median score for somebody who's not in that, for everybody who's not in that category, is going to be about a 143. So, one, you got to take that into account, because we don't know what we don't know. Like, nobody really knows why that happens. I mean, you can, again, you can infer whatever, it's a fact, right? So if you want to infer that's the school system, okay. If you want to infer, well, no, it's not the school system, and what happened before the school system, that's fine. You can infer whatever you want to infer. But the fact is that 152 for a minority app is way above the median score for other minority apps. And law schools want to maintain a balanced community. And therefore, that 152, may be viewed as 156. So to get that 152, you're talking about 60. Right? Then you say, okay, so that's my plan. That's what I want to try to achieve is 60. And you say, well, where are my strengths and weaknesses? How am I going to do? What's my realistic? If my weakness isn't reading comp, right? Well, I do have time to work on it, and then I do have time to create a strategy that takes into account my weakness. So, for me, I'm Peter. I would set a very robust plan with a very clear objective, and I would have tested it months in advance. So if I'm looking for a 60, say, okay, where's it coming from? So there's reading comp, and there's analytical, and there's logical. This is 50, 23, 27, roughly. So you say, it's like, Jessica, when am I taking the test? So you may say, like, would it make sense that if you took this test in April or June, you would have more time than if you took it in February? Does that make sense? Sure. Okay, so, but that goes into everybody's calculus. When are you going to take the test, right? So for me, it's not even close. If I'm trying to go to law school in August, right, I am so fine with taking this out to June. Now, I'm not going to take it out to June if I don't need to. But man, oh man, because if I'm here now and I say, well, right now, reading comp is my problem. Well, everything's a problem, but there are more or less degrees, right? All right, but I'm saying, like, if I sit down and reading comp and I'm getting a 9, that's going to be difficult to correct over here. Like, how do you go from a 9
Or 29.
to a 61 total? Well, what I'm saying here, you get, if I'm there, I don't, it's unlikely I can make up the difference because it's so low, right? So then I'd be saying, well, I can still be weaker here. It's, again, I think this is the hardest area to change, right? But if I can make the 9 a 12, which seems like, wait a minute, that's only 2 passages. I mean, that does seem like something that, with thought and practice, can be achieved. Right? well, then the 12 here, you would subtract that from the 61, right? And then you end up with 49. I've got 3 sections to get to 49. So let's say, hopefully, logical reasoning is one of your strongest areas, because it's half the test. So everyone should concentrate more on logical reasoning than any other section. Because it's half the test. Not even close. Not even close. So then you say, okay, well, I need this 49. What would happen if I got a 30 in the logical? So there might be a 16 and a 14, there might be a 17 and a 13, 15 and a 15, but if the total of the 2 sections were 30, right? So 15 each. Well, you'd take 30 out of here, and you'd be left with a deficit of 19. And it's unlikely that in the analytical reasoning, you're gonna get a 19, right? So that plan is not gonna work unless you get a 19 in analytical, all right? So if you went, so you look at this and maybe this is where you are. In other words, maybe right now you're saying, I can do this, and I can do this, but I can't do that. And you say, well, I have time to work this out, but that's not going to get it done. And this, I know, has got to come down, right? So you say, on my best day, I can only get a 13. Well, now it's -6, yes? So you say, well, if this turns in, so this was plan A, and that's not going to work, right? And I say, well, realistically, that 6 has got to find its way distributed among the other 2, right? So you say, okay, but this I can do, this I can do, right? It would be really hard to see this happening without reading comp going up, all right? Because then you say, because here, you get 2 sections. So, but it's really hard to get 2 17s here. In other words, you get a 34, you would pick up 4 there, right? Because you got to pick up 6, right? And this became a 14. Well, now you got it, right? Now you got the 61. But that is not something that's easy to accomplish. And again, you don't have to get a 61. If you came in with 58, so if you lower this number to a 58, you say, well, wait a minute, what, a 58 will be what? 151. Right. And now that 58, I get breathing room of 3. So wait a minute, if I do 58 and I go back here and I say, well, here's where I am. All right. This I think I can count on, 30, 12, and that's 42, right? So that 42 makes us a 16, right?
Right.
So that looks less ugly. Now, I still have to work on this, but if you're saying now, on my best day, I'm gonna get a 13 in analytical, well, now it's only -3, right? So if this comes down to 13, well, if I pick up 1 here, and I pick up 2 here, I have it, I have my 58. And so it's just, again, it's really this very dynamic, it's preparation. When I prepare, it's so creative, right? When I prepare, I'm walking up and down, there's always music on, I'm walking up and then the office is on the ground floor. I'm constantly in motion, I'm constantly talking out loud. I would scare the living daylights out of somebody who didn't know what I was doing. I'm constantly walking, I'm in complete motion insofar that my body allows that. Right. And it's this wonderfully creative process. So think about, one, give yourself time to achieve something that, you want to go to law school, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And what % of the population ends up going to law school. I don't know, but you get, it's minuscule, talk to me.
Yes.
So you want to be doing something that, again, I have about 50 members. If I go from my siblings to grandchildren, you know, grandnephews, nieces, whatever, there are about 50 of us. There's one lawyer. That doesn't mean there are others who couldn't have been lawyers, for sure, they could have, right? You get this one, right? And that's the reality of what you want to accomplish, is it, you know, this is daunting. But it's what you want, and you want people to pay you to do what you love to do for the rest of your life. So that's where I would be. And then you take steps. You take steps to say, if I can rehabilitate the reading comp, I'm going to do it. You take steps that if I can rehabilitate the analytical, I'm going to do it. And you take steps and say, you know, I got to get the CIRAC thing down, particularly for logical, right? And I've got to remember it's psychometric, and I've got to practice that, the psychometric thing of whacking the ball. Not doing it too soon, but doing it. And, so 58 would get the job done, without a doubt. And again, there's still flexibility in there. To say 58 will get the job done, Jessica, doesn't mean that 56 won't, right? Yeah, yeah. So it's, work on what's achievable, and then just say, well, wait a minute. If my goal is to get a 16 in each section, right? How many questions do I have to answer? In other words, if you only answered 16 questions, you'd get a lot of time, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because you'd be dividing it into 35 minutes, right? And then, if you're only answering 16 questions, maybe 5 of them would come to you right away. Is that about okay?
Yeah.
Talk to me. Would it be
Yeah.
fair to say that for pretty much everyone in the room, 5 of the questions are questions you can whack the mole on?
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
But then you get to reinvest that time if you whack the mole, right?
Right.
Well, wait a minute. Now it sounds like I'm getting a lot of time. And if I only answered 16, and that would not be the good plan, but if I only answered 16, there would be 8 I was leaving alone. 9. I'd be leaving 9 alone, right? So what if I guess 2 right? Right, so I got 2 in the bank. And now, in order to achieve my goal of the 16, I just need to get 14 right? But that does mean that's a very high rate on return. It's about 90%, right? You're talking about 14 out of 16. Right. So then you say, well, maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe I want to answer 20. But remember, you're only trying to get, if I answer 20, I'm likely to guess 1 right. Right? So now if I'm answering 20, and I get 15 out of the 20 right, is that 75%? 15 out of 20? Talk to me.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I could do that, right? Maybe I could do 75% with the increased time. That 5 questions I'm not answering at 1:20 per second, a minute and 20 seconds per question, right? Times 5 is 6 minutes, right? So I get to reinvest the 6 minutes. If 5 of the questions are whack-a-mole, and they can be answered in 45 seconds, or say 50 seconds, would give you half a minute per question. That would be another 2.5 minutes. Now I'm talking about reinvesting 8.5 minutes and only having to answer 20 questions. It'd be less than that, because the ones you're whacking the mole, you'd be down to say 15. You're going into the kitchen and you're gonna make
Guacamole.
whatever you do, right? It's gonna be superb. It's gonna be superb.
I believe that.
Right? But it's gonna be a creation of yours. Yeah. You rush, you're gonna screw it up.
Yes.
Yeah, but where's Aristotle? I mean, you know, that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna rush on behalf of your client.